So, welcome everybody to tonight's Kanban Coaching Exchange. It's good to see you all. This evening's speaker is a long-term member of this community, plus many, many other meetup groups that I see her at as well. So when I was thinking, who can we have come and join us this evening, I thought, well, Louise. Mainly because I know Louise through coming on classes. And like I said earlier on, she's a lifelong learner. So if you ever want to know about a course, then probably Louise is the person to ask about because she would have been on it. She's probably got a whole rating system going on. So Louise is an agile coach, a learner of a lot of information. So there's a lot of stuff up there in the grey cells, and works for King's College. And she's been in our industry for many, many years. And so let's give her a warm welcome. Over to you, Louise.
Hey, hello everyone. Uh, I've got a big hand. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see. Hopefully that has come through for people. And then I'll move everybody back over to here. So if I'm looking to the right, it's because you are all on my right. But you're looking at my other screen. So can you see overlapping methods and frameworks, or how to end up with a workable process? Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is what my talk is about. And it's mainly because this is where I have spent most of my life. So if we have a little think about who I am. So this is the information all about me. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to be stalked. In fact, I encourage anybody that meets me to stalk me on LinkedIn because there might be something about me that they might want to know about. I used to look after a change framework for a major financial organisation, which is where quite a lot of this information comes from. Although some of what I do now is also a couple of my examples also from where I currently work. I've spent a lot of time putting stuff together to make it work for my organisation. So in that sense, I am a very pragmatic agile person. So my job predominantly was taking industry stuff and making it work for my organisation. So I didn't really care where I got it from, as long as it all worked together. And one of the things, and this little thing is actually taken from my LinkedIn because I like this sentence, is what I really like to do is help people with their conundrums and build a better work world. So that's really where I'm at. I have done a podcast. So again, if you want to listen to 42 minutes of me going on about what's in my head, then you are quite welcome to listen to that. It will tell you a little bit more about me. And I'll just get this out there already. I actually work in a scaled agile framework ecosystem. So don't throw tomatoes at me, please. Safe isn't popular in some circles, but actually I've worked in it a lot, but I've also worked in other things as well. So just be aware, I'm not a dyed in the wool, any kind of person. It just happens that they employ me to do safe stuff. So what I hope you take away is that it's okay to get things wrong, because failing in any way, shape, or form is useful. I've learned most of the things that were useful when I got things badly wrong. I have a basic approach to how you might combine methods and frameworks. But it's out of my head. So it's not like really anything, but I have got circles and little boxes underneath to explain it. And there, hopefully you'll get some ideas for combining approaches in your future, because I don't know any of you, I know some of you, but it's just this idea that you don't have to stick with one thing. Yeah, I borrow quite heavily from around the place if I think it's useful. So tell me, what do you want to take away? So if you could put something in the chat. Oh, we throw Timbits. Thank you. I'll have to figure out what a Timbit is. I do have some friends in Canada, and thank you for the tomato, Helen. So if you could put in the chat what you want to take away from this, because I'm sure you had some ideas about what you thought this talk was about, which may or may not be what the talk is actually about. because I realised once I wrote it that overlapping frameworks, methods and frameworks could be read in a couple of ways. Inspiration and recharge. Yay. Jim, you are always an inspiration to me. Fresh ideas and perspectives. Oh, how can we adapt approaches and tools from different frameworks? Yeah. That's kind of up there. Hopefully you'll get a sense of that. And somebody's like something, oh, something more than Scrumban. Yes, I even bought the book on Scrumban because it appeared in the list of resources when I did the course with Helen. Fresh ideas and perspectives. Yeah, okay. Your lessons, how you adapted, problem first approach. Yes. Curious about the implied assumption that overlapping methods would be an issue. Oh, you'll be amazed. You will be amazed. But some things work better together than others. Okay. Right, so it gives me a little bit of an idea. So we'll see if what I'm doing is what matches up to you. Something wants going up there. It's not such a thing. Somebody published a book on it. So, has anybody seen this picture before? Yeah. Yeah, it's around. I mean, I kind of like it. I know there are some detractors from this. Oh, with terror. There are some detractors for this particular diagram, but I think it's quite useful to show the complexity that we have in the agile space, because there's a lot going on there. And particularly you've got scaledy stuff up here. You've got, scrums down here. We've got like human-centered design thinking, Kniffin, which was around for a really long time and has more recently started to be used as a thing. We've got, large-scale Scrum. We've got some other things, Kanban's in there, right over here, right next to Kaizen. There are some detractors because there are some things that are repeated in the picture. I'm sure if you went through it with a fine-tooth comb, you would find that. But I just like, I'm from London, so I like tube maps. So I will always be there for a tube map. But the other thing as well, I just think it's really interesting because some of these things are actually, because they've even got Prince 2 waterfall in there. So it's kind of like an acknowledgement that we work in, as agile people, in quite a complex environment, and that's just the agile. If we then have a look at what you're actually mixing, you're mixing a whole load of this stuff over here with the little pinky arrows. These are all things that come from an organization. And this was just me dumping a whole load of stuff out of my head. Admittedly, I worked in a regulated industry, but that's the kind of thing that's out there, organizational culture, local culture, because large organizations can actually have local culture as well, especially when you're mixed site. There's processes, practices, governance, control, and compliance. There's ITIL, projects, programs, building regulations, standards, other kinds of standards could be technical standards, other regulations, law, security, confidentiality, architecture, infrastructure, small scale, large scale, whatever you want. That's all what you get from an organization, depending upon what its history is like, where it's been, all of those things. And then you add agile, whatever flavor is being asked for or assumed. Yeah, so you've got to mix this stuff with agile, whatever that means to the organization. And they might actually, oh yes, there is. Where is the customer end user? I think there might have been something around user stuff. Human-centered design was in there. But there is these kinds of things that are ongoing within your organization. Yeah, and then you've got agile. So where does this mix show up? Well, it shows up all over the place. It can show up in small teams, programs or agile programs. It can be part of a transformation, or it could be that your organization is agile and is growing and actually needs some of these things because of the markets that it's actually entering, or it could be something else. However, the starting point is important, because when you're looking at some of this stuff, this kind of thing can affect how your agile stuff lands quite significantly. And not only that, it's annoyingly different in different parts of an organization. So if we're having a look at some examples, we've got things like, here's a single team. The context is that it's a 70-person team. It was running in Scrum. And I'm not saying that my examples are great examples. They're just things that I have encountered. And the team had 3 pods and a Scrum Master that was running with these 3 pods in the team. They used the 3MIGO approach to refine stories. Now, 3MIGO approach, I don't know if people are familiar with it, but actually it turns up more often than you think. So, and when I first came to this particular area, I had to look up pods and I had to look up the 3MIGO approach, because even in all the time that I spent like learning about Agile, these things had never turned up. And also, so that there's always something that can surprise you. And then they were using Jira as their tool of choice. Now, the constraints were old style thinking. And you can see that from the 70-person team. And I used to have somebody that used to turn up at my Agile community of practice and say, oh, I'm a Scrum Master for a 20-person team. And I'm thinking, no, that doesn't sound right. But this is old style thinking permeating into teams, into single teams. The Scrum Masters also weren't very well educated. So they were quite new. They maybe didn't have the strength of character, and also they used to change quite often as well. So they weren't necessarily new Scrum Masters, but they were new to this team, which was also a bone of contention. And there was a lot of, this is how it's done here, kind of going on. So what are we actually mixing? Oops, I've gone wrong. Gone back to the wrong place. I want to be here. There we go. What we're actually mixing is a huge amount of traditional stuff with Scrum and some odd agile practices that we're not quite sure where they came from. So Google is your friend in these kinds of things, because some of these are odd agile practices that actually aren't part of an overall frame of something. So you're mixing these things up. You've also got, here's another single team. This is where it's a 10 people in the team. So it's much more what we expect of a Scrum team, but it's running in safe Scrum, which isn't quite the same as Scrum. It's largely congruent. You can map the two together. Sorry, that was one Scrum Master. And the Azure DevOps is the tool of choice. The constraints, however, are things like no one apart from the product owner was full-time. So again, we've got a lot of traditional thinking going on here, which is that people don't belong to a work team full-time. You cut them up into pieces and you put them into different teams. And the Scrum Master ran 2 different teams in ADO, so they were like logically separated in the tooling, but they all went to the same events, which again was quite odd. So they were mixing safe Scrum, a little bit of Kanban, because actually that's how their boards appeared in Azure DevOps, because Azure DevOps, just like Jira, you can get things that look like Kanban boards in them. And if you're really unlucky, they do to do, doing, done. If you're, sometimes they're a little bit better. But this team was using a board which looked like the other team's boards, but actually wasn't necessarily very helpful, because some teams were using some of the columns, but not all of the columns. And then we had lots of traditional ways of thinking. So we were trying to blend a bunch of things together. Here we've got an example of several teams. So this is PI planning for a whole load of arts running at the same team. So it's a safe ecosystem, but effectively what we're talking about is teams of teams. Okay, so you've got lots of individual teams and they're all supposed to be pulling in the same direction to achieve an overarching aim. Dependencies surfaced during PI planning, sometimes afterwards, but mostly you hope to get dependencies surfacing through PI planning, which is a cadence-based event that runs every 3 months, approximately. However, the art was not built around value. So they had when they started to build their teams of teams, they actually aligned them to their existing way of working. So in other words, they slapped Agile on top of it. And I'm sure some of you were thinking, oh, I remember that. That happened. And we did have some teams operating in Kanban and some in Scrum. Okay, so you've then got different teams operating in different things, which generally is not a problem. But there are sometimes there's some limitations around the use of these things if they're sticking within a particular team. You've got multiple teams working together. So the constraints we had is that the features was aligned very strongly with individual teams. So even though we've got a set of teams which are ostensibly working together, actually we've effectively got siloed working going on in the same overall team of teams. And the Scrum Masters also ran traditional projects. So they weren't really Scrum Masters, they're what we call delivery managers, but they were running Agile projects as well as traditional projects. And the traditional projects were very, very waterfall because some of them were things like building works. So which run to a system called Riga in the UK and is very sequential. So what we're mixing there is, again, traditional ways of working and safe Kanban and safe Scrum, because it was actually sitting inside a safe ecosystem. And there is guidance in safe about Scrum and safe Kanban. Although I always tell people to go and read other stuff, like to actually read the Scrum guide if they're doing Scrum, and to actually look up Kanban. Flight levels. Yes. Here's another example. This is part of an organisation, and this was quite interesting because I'm sorry, there was lots in the context here, which is why the writing is slightly smaller. This was a homegrown approach. It was part of an overall organisation, but within this particular part of the organisation, they had come up with their own homegrown approach. It had scaled to 9 teams, interestingly, organically, which I thought was quite fun. All the teams ran on the same cadence. All the teams were using their own Kanban boards. Kanban was very strong in this particular part of the organisation, but also the teams were working in sprints. So they were applying a sprint cadence across the top as well. And reviews for all the teams were held at the same time, demonstrated by different team members each time. And they did that. That all happened in the office, apart from the people that were in other countries. Co-located teams, pretty much, with a really big wall. This is the biggest wall, apart from possibly, Helen, on some of your pictures. This was the biggest wall I have ever seen, with Post-it notes stuck all over it, with work at different stages. It was really quite inspiring. And parts of the wall were broken up into different activities. So it was actually showing a flow of work through the different parts of the overall process, because although they were working within a cadence, they then had another cadence that sat across the top of it, of things, so which were then billed to a release. And again, they were using Jira and Confluence, which were their tools of choice, but they had a lot of stuff that was physical, which actually is quite unusual these days, but they were co-located. The constraints were they were part of a larger organisation with prescribed processes and culture. So there were some processes that they had to adhere to. Like, there wasn't a choice. It was generally around governance, control and compliance, because that is set centrally. And there was an existing change framework which needed to be followed. However, I actually designed that framework, so this stuff fitted within it. It was absolutely fine. But you could get a bit two-dimensional about it and say that it didn't, but it did fit in. So again, it was mixing a whole load of organisational processes. This was actually more like Kanban, because the stuff that they drew from was originally Kanban stuff and Scrum stuff, and it was the organic scaling that was quite interesting, because most of the time you can manage teams organically up to about 3 or 4. They scaled to 9 teams, all organically, which I thought was fab. But that was only a part of the overall organisation. And then we get to the organisational side. So this is a large organisation. At its height, the change framework covered 12,000 people in change. It was an agile first framework with a traditional wrapper. So it had traditionally typed stuff around it. The change framework was in use across all change work, which was, again, an interesting thing, because there was a mandate that if you were doing change work, you had to use the framework. Okay, so it then comes down to how flexible the framework is. Agile work existed in agile programs, because that was how we tracked work within the organization, but it was actually agile programs, not agile projects. We'd already been through agile projects and landed at agile programs overall. Local optimization was allowed. So if you needed to, you could do something locally. Organizational processes and language were built in. So that's one of the advantages of having an overall framework, is that you can standardize on what things mean, which is useful, because then you're not always having arguments about, well, what do you mean by this word? And this is what I mean by this word. And the tooling, again, was predominantly Jira and Confluence, which we actually did use in how we articulated certain stuff around releases, and what we had to hold on file for regulators to come in and check in X many years if something horrible happened. The constraints were that everywhere did it differently, which is actually a slight issue, because you have to figure out, okay, what's the overarching thing that people can then buy into? Straight to Agile needed to work, because we actually came out with an Agile first framework all in one go. It was the first time that we had actually built our framework in the space where our original framework sat. So overnight, things changed. So we needed to make sure that we had good communication in order to land with people ahead of time, so they knew what they were doing. And there had been previous attempts at Agile. There were at least 3. So this was a bigger deal, but there had been 3 attempts previously. So people would remember Agile, not necessarily in a positive light, because at least one of the Agile transformations, the project managers had kicked up a fuss because they felt that they were being told how to manage. So there were things, I would have said that's more around the change management element, but that was just something to be aware of. So we were mixing traditional stuff. So that was MSP, so management successful programs, management of portfolios, and Prince 2. That was where the organisation had come from. SAFe, because SAFe had landed. There was also large-scale Scrum in the mix somewhere. I kept asking, where was the large-scale Scrum stuff? But actually, nobody could tell me. And I think Rickard, he actually worked at that organisation the same time I did. So, but SAFe and less, we did try to take account of them. And we had some quite strong less proponents within the organisation who were advocating for less type stuff. We had Scrum, which had been reasonably well established, because the first set of Scrum content had gone in 2008, and Kanban at team level as well. But again, it was very limited Kanban, because there wasn't very much understanding about Kanban. So people thought it was a board in Jira, and that was it. So those are examples, and you can see how, hopefully you can see, because I've tried to point it out, that how the organisation is, where that agile piece is that you're trying to situate, has this stuff that sits around it and affects it. And you have to take account of that in some way, shape or form. So my basic approach is to understand what it is that's going on, diagnose, shape it, test it, and then evolve it. So, and just for your information, I plugged my original slides into Copilot and it told me this is what my approach was. So, but I thought it was like, it's 5 little bubbles, so you can remember what they are. So understanding is about context first. Context drives everything. What environment am I in? What culture, constraints, governance exists? What am I inheriting that I can't do away with? You need to know what those are, where the boundaries are, where you've got some play. You then need to diagnose what's really happening. So, because the reason why people choose to do something in a different way is because they have a problem. If you don't understand what that problem is, then you're not actually going to get anywhere. And don't start with methods and frameworks. Don't start there. They're things that you hold in your back pocket, which might answer the problem you've got, but you don't start there. Start with reality. How does work or value flow? What's working, what's not working, what's people's particular bugbears, and where are the dependencies and friction? Especially when you move up to more organizational levels, you need to know where the dependencies, the interdependencies are actually lying. Shaping is about connecting things. So connect them together. So there is no pure approach. I've told you at the beginning, I'm a pragmatic agilist. I don't believe in a pure approach. I personally use quite a lot of methods and frameworks. They're models within themselves. You have to understand them in order to understand where the stretch and the squeeze are in those particular approaches. But very often, most of my life has been about mixing things. So borrow from multiple methods and frameworks. Yeah, I would say don't be a purist. You can start with something which is maybe one particular approach, if that's appropriate. But what you might find is that over time, you start moving around. And you'll need to adapt to fit your context, whatever the context is, and be deliberate around things like governance, control, practices, and language. Be deliberate about those. For example, this is an agile example, but it's a real example. When we moved from our old change framework at NatWest to using Prince 2, Prince 2 actually uses something called, I think it's an issue report, is how they actually manage change in Prince 2. The wording for change request form was so well embedded in the organization, we couldn't take it out. So we had to use change request form instead. So you have to understand your local culture and context in order to see what can you change easily, what is actually going to take a lot longer time, because something like that will take time. Test with real people. I always talk about real people because theory doesn't survive first contact. Theory is useful to be getting your thinking in shape, but people mess things up. I went to Canterbury for my daughter's, she had an offer holders day, and the third years they were saying, oh, it was a games design course. They kept saying, oh, you just get children to test things. They'll find every single hole. So these things do not survive working with real people. Real people will give you the what ifs. They'll give you the things that are going to break your stuff. They'll give you something that you never thought of. They use things in ways that you did not anticipate. So you just have to dig up some people. Arguably these days you can just suck it into AI and see what it says. But I will still always say, try and find some real people somewhere to poke in. So validate with people and look at data and experience, not your experience, other people's experience. Because I still remember going to a meeting, it was around 2001, but that was when I discovered that I was not the same as everybody else that had a bank account. I thought I was just a bog standard bank account user, but actually I wasn't. Okay, right. Somebody's asked me about decisioning. Let me get to evolve. and then we'll talk about decisioning. And evolving is keep adjusting. You are never done. Learn from what happens, tweak, don't over-engineer, balance. Balance experimentation with certainty. Because one of the problems that you sometimes get, there's this idea with agile transformations that you have an emergent process. That's fine for some people. Some people need certainty. So actually, they're going to throw a what if at you. What do I do in this situation? And you have to have the answer. Okay, it's having the answer. So you've got to figure out who are the people, when do you need to allow for experimentation, and when do you need to give people certainty? If you're moving from a more traditional environment, you're going to need a bit more certainty. All right, it makes people feel like they're walking across a tightrope with no net if you don't give them a certain amount of certainty. Now, as we're talking about decisioning, I mean, it can't be, it just depends. It just depends. It's very annoying for most people. So if we're talking about decisioning happens here in shape. And there's a few more slides. This isn't the end slide, which might help with this, but it's normally in shape that you're actually thinking, right, okay, this is the way I think this should work. These are the things that I want to bring together. So it's normally around then, and then you test it. You test it with a friendly. It might be that it's just, well, you just show them a PowerPoint slide and say, oh, would this work for you? I've actually been in a position where I've had to go live with the process, and the only time we've had to test it is by doing what we used to get people in a room, video them, and then I'll walk them through the process with something that they had done recently. So that was a way that we could test, because we had to go just with a single, we had to go big bang, whether we liked it or not. So, there's something up here which says context beats theory, mixing is inevitable, so do it deliberately. People and culture will make or break it, and start small and grow credibility. So these are the things. So when we're starting small, we test it in, with some friendlies, and then we eventually, when we feel okay about it, we then start to build it into our overall approach. So it's not the answer, it's an answer. You might have a different answer to this. You might be doing some decision in diagnose rather than shape. I would always throw everything into a big cauldron and then see what fell out. Once I talk to some people, I'd have some ideas and then just talk to them. Yeah, that's why you have other people. Actually, that's why you test it with real people. They will find the things that are your blind spots. So because, and that's really helpful. That's why I try and pick people who are not like me, and also pick people who I know are uber critical. So, but who are going to give me honest feedback. And also if I have a feel for like where they work, whether their area is difficult, what kind of objections they're going to come up with, that kind of thing. That always helps. So, how you integrate all of that and make it work? Well, ask questions. Know your boundaries. So if you're working with a team, what are the boundaries for your team? If you're working with a team of teams, what's the boundaries where you are? I've spent quite a lot of my life working at organisational level. So my boundaries tend to be the organisation or parts of an organisation. Also think about what you've got to work with already. Who are you working with? What are you inheriting? Or what can you create? What's the culture? Culture is really important. How far can you push it now? And is there a common way to access information? And start thinking about what to do first. This is when you start, arguably, to start your decision making. Who do you work with? Well, lots of people. They're people from different things, people who have a vested interest, people who will be rolling it out, people who will be impacted by the use of it, governance people, tools people, people with the PMO, standards people, compliance people, control people, any other kind of people. It's people. So always remember that people are at the end of this. They're going to be using this. You can't not include them in the decision making. Now, if you're doing it organisationally and your organisation is thousands of people, you can't do everybody. So pick a representative sample. You might have to pull people from different parts of the organisation, but try and get those people who can give you that viewpoint or who might test run it. And how do you connect things together? Deep dive on what needs to connect in. You do actually need to know a bit about the things that you're going to connect together. So one of the things that I discovered was I didn't know Kanban very well. So in 2024, when I was made redundant, I actually bought myself some courses with Helen. And my understanding of Kanban is a lot better now. It's way better. And in fact, I then went on to do Kanban maturity model and Kanban coaching with David Anderson. So, and I still do. I still also go to, if you want to know how Scrum and Kanban work together, there is Scrum Better with Kanban, which Helen also runs, which I have also attended, although Helen did ask me why I was there. So, but it was because I wanted to get a better understanding of how these things overlap. So where there are things available where these things overlap, take advantage of them. If you know somebody that's mixed stuff, ask them. Keep focused on what you're there to do. Don't get distracted. We all have our favourite little things that we love. I can spend hours in methodology nerd world. I'm happy there, but it doesn't help me get the job done, which is I need to redesign something for an organisation that I'm expecting them to use. Borrow. Think about what you're going to borrow and how much. Because even though my financial institution that I worked for, it wasn't a less shop. But if you actually, sorry, it wasn't a less or a safe shop. But if you looked at our framework, it looked like it was a safe shop. It wasn't. The organisation did not actually subscribe to any one methodology. So we picked large chunks of safe actually, but there were different things that we were using in order to get to where we went to. And some of our content was quite old because I wrote the first Agile content in 2000. So a really long time ago. So reinterpret. So don't be constrained by what these things are. If you have an understanding of what they are, you can give them a different name. And Jose was going on about words, I think last month. Was it last month, Helen? Yes. And about how namings or words can constrain you. Yeah, so think about the language that you're using, think about what you're using, what bits are useful and what not, and also what your culture can take. Because when you're thinking about what you're using and what not, you've also got to think about when you break things apart, do you break the underlying model? Yes, because sometimes you have to take a whole bit of something because it works together in order to work with the other things that you're building around it. This one is important, and I'm sorry it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, but create your vision that holds all of that stuff. To a certain extent, you need to envision this. Yes, I did watch it. It's a very good video. So, you have to have a view on how this stuff fits together, because if you don't have a view, you then cannot explain it to get people on side at the start. So you have to have a view of it and think about what ifs, you know, objection clinics, what can go wrong? What if they don't like it? What if they still love the traditional way of doing things? I still have ex-project managers who love their Excel spreadsheets. You cannot get them out of their Excel spreadsheets. And test it with real people. You know, if you're connecting stuff, test it with real people to see what they say. What you need to bring is optimism. Be optimistic. Don't feel like, oh, it's never going to work. Be optimistic. I have spent quite a lot of time being optimistic and having faith that things will work together. And we've been trying to answer. Yes, that's right. Understand the work. Curiosity. Got to bring some curiosity. Context is everything. You need to be interested, not only in what's going on in an area, but what's going on with the people. You can't divorce the people. You have to know about the people. Also knowledge, the situation, the methods, the frameworks, practices and tools you'll be changing. You don't need to know everything, but you need to know enough in order to mix and put things together. Knowledge of the people. You'll find this out because they'll come and tell you if they don't like things. But a little anticipation is helpful because then you can help manage that change. and also how to interconnect things together, have a view. Being experimental, but know when people need certainty rather than experiment. Being neutral. So, because you're going to get really hurt if it's your favorite thing in the world and everybody hates it. All right. So be neutral. Perseverance, because sometimes things don't happen straight away. You set a seed and then 3 years later it comes out. It can be that long. Credibility. If you are credible, then people will buy into it because they buy into you. People buy people first and services second. So you need to be credible. And change management. Don't undercut change management. In some organizations, change management is separate from the technical change. I actually think they should be together because I don't understand how you can change something and then not land it. But change management skills are really useful. There's ADCAR from ProSci. There's also COTA, the 8-step COTA change process. So those are things that you could, if you're not aware of them, you could have a think about. And you'll be pleased to know that this is almost the end. In conclusion, it's not magic. There's no easy answer when you bring organizational culture into view. You have to deal with the culture. It's not going away and it's going to hit you over the head like a ton of bricks if you don't pay attention. You can mix quite a lot of things. You just need to figure out what you're doing it for and what's the purpose. Play around with it. Yeah, sometimes your first idea isn't going to work. So draw pictures, show others, change them. Know your environment. If you don't, that will kill it. This is along with culture. Because there could be some things in the environment that you're not aware of. So you spend a little bit of time getting to know your environment and keep trying. Don't be afraid to tweak once it's out there. It's this element of have faith and step off that cliff. So I have a second in conclusion slide, which is, would I do the same thing again? And the answer to that is no. I've learned a lot over the years. And when I look back, I think I might have started more with a Kanban approach because I do appreciate what I've learned in the past. In the past couple of years. And that's because the one thing that really resonates with me about Kanban is start where you are. Because I think you do. You have to start with what you've got, not with what you think you should have. And that's the pragmatist in me. Start with where you are. And then you can work your way out of that as long as you've got your eye on where you need to go. So, questions? Or have I bored you all to death?
We literally just had one come up from Mike in the chat channel. How did you cope with top management and project managers' deterministic mindset? This will happen because I planned it and I want it to happen, when reality is more likely we don't know what we don't know, let alone assess when will it be done.
Yeah, you have to work with them. There's no getting away from that. You have to spend time working with them and talking to them. That was what I've spent a lot of years talking to people and also figuring out who are the people who are weighty in that community. Yeah, because exactly. Because if you can get them on side, if they think, oh, Louise knows what she's talking about. And I still remember a project manager saying to me, Louise, 95% of what you put out is great. It's always correct, but I just have this one question. So that for me was saying I'm credible, people believe me, and they trust what I have to say. And I can work with that. So that I would say is what you have to do. You just have to get in, find those people with the strong voices, work with them. And then if you find there are other people, because there are things at different levels, what you hope will happen is that if you've got credibility at the lower levels, when they talk to their managers, they say, oh, Louise is fine. She knows what she's talking about. Yeah, and then they start to have belief.
Thanks for the confirmation.
So tell me if you've answered some of these, because I know you hit some of these as we went through. How do you approach to check, test your personal beliefs or biases or your blind spots?
Yeah, I have other people poke me. It's basically as simple as that, because I have my prejudices just as anybody else has. I have my blind spots just like anybody else. The only way that I can get around that is by having people that question that. Amy, who is here, is with my co-coach. She actually questions me quite a lot, and I value her opinion. And also other people that are here, if they, ask me questions, both in work and out of work. Anybody who challenges me, it's not a challenge, it's me rethinking or retuning my thoughts.
Okay, we've also got, at what point in this process you usually find yourself decisioning when you decide to walk away if it's not something worthy or have the appetite to do valuable work/contribution?
That's normally around shaping after I've tested with people. So some things you try and put together and it just doesn't gel. You think, oh, well, there's too many things, because also keeping it simple is also helpful. Because if you've got to explain it, you don't want some like really convoluted slide that they're going to have to turn around and, figure out what it is. You actually want to simplify as much as possible. And when you test with people, sometimes you have to say goodbye to things that you really liked. And that's okay, because it doesn't serve the organization. Yeah, these people are giving you these things for a reason. Noah's.
Yeah, thanks for answering this. I was just wondering because these two questions actually overlap each other because I think I was asking, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Like the personal beliefs and yeah, right, your blind spot and biases, and you correctly said, right, you need a partner or people to be able to check on those blind spots. But I'm just wondering, like, is it not too late in the process when you go into the shaping process? Because now your self beliefs get tested, right? And
Yeah,
that.
but I think some of that is down to experience as well.
Mhm.
I've had enough of my stuff blown up that I understand that not everything is going to survive contact with real people. So, and what I try and do, so I don't try to get wedded to a particular approach. It's one of the reasons why I pick pragmatism over a particular approach, because I think even if I think it works, it may only work for me. And other people are different. They have different needs. They probably have pressures in their teams that I am not aware of. And whatever I build has to work for them. So, which is
Right,
why
right.
I'm such a proponent of, if you can get those people into test early on, do so as soon as possible. If you've got a thinking partner, I mean, AI is apparently a great thinking partner, but I also use actual real people as
Right,
well, especially if they're from the particular kind of area that I'm interested in testing it with.
right, right. No, thanks for answering this because I always ask myself, what did I miss? Where, right? What am I missing? Right? Like because there is always in retrospect a learning, right, from that experience also.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
And you can't know everything. This is the thing. I
right.
know a lot. I know a lot because I've got a lot of stuff in my head that just won't shut up. But
Yeah.
I don't know everything.
Right, right. Thanks for answering this. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, any more questions for Louise?
I got one.
Go
Is
on,
it
Raf.
okay?
Yeah.
Uh, I'm a troublemaker, sorry. uh, I do not remember the slide. I think there was a slide, and I sorry for my ignorance, like I probably was not paying attention. Uh, Around a constraint where I think people are doing different things, and it was called out as a constraint, right? There was a team,
Oh,
right? Like I was just wondering from the agility point of view, or approaching things in an agility point of view, what exactly was the constraint there when people are doing different things in different ways on these teams?
okay. That was
Yeah.
the example of the organization.
Right, right, right.
And that is when everybody does it differently. So, like in very large organizations, although there's probably an overarching culture for the organization, what you do find is that different parts of the organization also have their own culture. And there is a very strong feeling of not invented here. And you mostly can't get away from that. So you have to acknowledge that in some way. you know, and the way that I do it is if I've got control of the organization's processes, is that I try to build in flexibility. And that means looking at where you're actually setting the level of your process or what it is that you're writing about. Yeah, because good processes, if they're good processes, they actually last quite a long time, but they're probably not down in the deep. They're not like press this button, turn this dial. They're not that level. It's much, much more high level.
Yeah,
So
yeah, got it. Right,
it's
thanks. Yeah, I mean like guardrails and safeguards, like this is where that territory we are heading, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.